Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas! Oh! Christmas is over. 2021 is wrapping up, and it's time to look back and reflect on all the things I've done.
And all the things you didn't do.
We don't have time for that.
Sure we do. You didn't become president of the United States this year.
That's not fair. It wasn't even an election year.
You didn't smooch Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh, and you did?
You didn't watch a satisfying ending of Game of Thrones.
You're still salty about that, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. How do you do? It's Mr. Moo. Happy New Year! What a year it's been. In this video, I'm going to rewind 12 months and look back at all the projects that I've worked on. I saw a nice progression from the beginning of the year all the way to the end of the year. I'm going to take you through each of the projects that I worked on and tell you some things that I liked, what I disliked, and what I learned. Let's get into it. I started off the year by participating in the Squarespace Jam 11, making Juggle Bunnies. It was a game where bunnies fell from above and the player controlled the juggler's hands, trying to get the bunnies into the hat and preventing them from hitting the ground. What I disliked about this game was that it was way too hard. Even after hours of playing and being the creator of the game, I think the most bunnies I've ever gotten into the hat was about 4 or 5. People who have never played this game really had a tough time, especially for a game jam where people only play for a couple of minutes to leave a review, and no one's really going to spend time mastering the mechanic, which is a bit of a shame because one thing that I liked about this game was the mechanic. I thought it was pretty unique. Another thing I liked is the music made by my brother and the art made by my sister. And it gave the game a really creepy, distinct circus vibe.
3, 2, 1, go!
And of course, these absolutely adorable bunnies. So what did I learn with this game? I was working with my siblings on this game jam, of which I have a bunch of them, and none of them had a ton of game dev experience. So this was my chance for me to be the big cheese and manage the team. Another big lesson I learned during this game jam was make your game easier than it seems like it should be. If you think your game is at the right level, it's probably too hard. And if you think the game is hard, it's probably impossible for someone who doesn't know the mechanic. Remember, you're the one who made the mechanic, so you know exactly how it behaves. A new player is clueless to that and hasn't had nearly the amount of practice that you've had with it. Then I was contracted to make an Among Us mod, built on top of the Shelfman's remake. I made a battle royale like Fortnite, with guns, health, shield, a storm moving in, and all that good stuff. It took me about 2 weeks, and it was all a bit hush-hush because it was being made for one of the biggest creators on YouTube, Preston, who made a video using the mod that ended up getting over 1 million views. I made a video about making the mod, and of course that's the most viewed video on my channel, which I guess shouldn't be any surprise. Things I liked, I actually made money as a game dev for starters. I also like Among Us and Battle Royale, so it was fun to explore how this game could be adapted. And I thought it came out pretty well. It wasn't incredibly polished, but I played with my friends and we had a good time. I also made some friends like the Shelfman and Llama Dev, who were also making other mods on the same Unity project. So what didn't I like about this? The reason I love game dev is because it's a creative outlet for me, and this felt much more like an assignment. I, like probably many of you, have dreams of supporting myself financially, just making games, but if it's just about making mods for other people's content, not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not as appealing to me personally. I just have a really long list of game ideas that I want to work on, but I won't be able to work on them if I'm working for other people. Okay, so what did I learn? Technically speaking, I sharpened my networking skills. I used Photon to support the online multiplayer aspect. And creating a game when there's online multiplayer is completely different from a game that is managed locally. This was also a project that I was coordinating with other people in the same Unity project, creating their own mods, and this time I was not in charge, and I was hopping onto a project that already existed. So I had to learn how this project was structured and how I can create my own component without breaking other people's work. Also, I learned you can get a lot of views by simply putting a famous person's face in the thumbnail. Who knew? That's why, for 2022, I've decided to legally change my face to this. Next up, we have Flappy Plane. This was a 1-hour challenge that I made up in which I used a random word generator to give me a word, and then I had 1 hour to make a game from that. Getting plane was honestly pretty lucky because there's so many directions I could have gone, and I decided to make a Flappy Bird remake. And this game was definitely just for the sake of making YouTube content. One thing I liked is that I actually succeeded with this challenge. One thing I didn't like is that it's a pretty bad game and I only did it for the views, and I was also pretty unsuccessful at that. And what I learned is the maker of Flappy Bird made $18 million for about an hour of work. What? All the while that I'm working on these games, I continue to work on my puzzle platformer Stolen Hearts. I'm in my 3rd year working on it, and it's definitely remained my main objective throughout the year, but I was constantly distracted by all these other projects. So when I wasn't working on other games, I would always go back to Stolen Hearts and work on that. Mostly creating new levels, new mechanics, new characters, but also creating this very out-of-date Steam page. Feel free to wishlist, by the way. I started a new video podcast series called Living Indie Grind, in which I interview various talented YouTube game devs from around the world and talk about what they're working on, their backgrounds, plans for the future, their influences, and all sorts of different game dev related topics. YouTube-wise, this is probably the most fun I've had in terms of creating content. Actually being able to talk to people on a similar journey that I'm on, finding out how similar our stories are and yet how different they can be, has definitely been the coolest way that I've been able to engage with other game devs. Especially since no one that I know personally actually works on game dev. So just being able to speak to someone who understands what you're going through has been awesome. So big shout out to these great content creators who came on the show. The links to all of those talks are in the description. Then, for the Chain Letter Jam, I made Road Snake, which is a twist on the classic arcade game Snake, except in this case, you have to collect the letters in order that spell out the word that's displayed on the top of the screen.
My anaconda don't want none unless you
Spell words. I used an implementation of the linked list to help me create the snake effect, and I used it to explain the fundamental computer science concept in a video that I created about the game, which ended up being one of my more viewed videos and one of my personal favorite videos that I made. And so what I liked about this game, it was well polished, it ended up being pretty fun, and honestly has a decent amount of replay value because Snake's just a great game. What I didn't like is the visual appeal. This is definitely an area that I'm trying to improve upon. I'm not sure if it's the use of my colors or the pixel art, but it's missing something. It's missing that X factor. And what I've learned from this game is that there is a place for fundamental computer science knowledge in game development, and I should be leaning on my background to find solutions and implementation. Also, turns out there is an interest for game devs who don't have a computer science background and want to learn more about these fundamentals to help them make their games. Then, for the Moo Moo Jam, hosted by Captain Moo, not me, Mr. Moo, I made Go Slap Yourself, in which the player controls two arms, pinball style, and you have to slap the cheeks of the character. But he's got a very tricky head, so it's easy to miss. And the best video I've ever made has been about this game. Have you ever woken up and you feel like this?
Oh wow, my big fat cheeks, they feel fantastic.
Well, I got the perfect solution for you. Go slap yourself. I think it probably could have been $1 million deal with Mark Cuban with that pitch. So what I learned is that I could make the perfect game. Things I liked is everything. It was the perfect game. Things I disliked, it's all downhill from here. Summer came and COVID numbers went down, the vaccine rolled out, and I was traveling, hanging out with friends, seeing people, and unfortunately game dev did take a bit of a pause for a couple months. In July, I made Busy Bee, which was a game that I made in a couple hours so that I could make a video about how busy I was, so that I can make a dumb song about how busy I was.
Oh, what a glorious thing to be, a healthy grown-up busy bee.
You just fly around avoiding beds and dancing and doing work before your meters run out. With these two games back to back, you can tell that I was peaking as a game dev. So what I liked about this game is that I incriminated myself with a video like this so that no future employer could ever take me seriously, and I will therefore have no choice except to make video games for a living, and therefore forcing me to follow my dreams. What I disliked is that I didn't receive any offers for a record deal, which frankly is offensive. And what I learned is that I need to refocus. Then in August, Nate Dev Jam with Wannabe Manisha came along. I made Cut and Run. It was a puzzle game in which you're trying to escape prison by cutting wires in a particular order by following specific instructions meant to trip you up. What I liked is I thought the puzzles were pretty good. I thought I used the theme of the jam pretty creatively, and I did pretty well in the jam. What I didn't like, I think I would have done even better in the jam if the game looked better. The art is just all over the place. I don't have a consistent style, the colors are off. The sad part is I spent a lot of time futzing with the art, but by the end of the jam, I just wasn't able to figure it out. I also made the art for each of the puzzles by hand, which was very time consuming. I also didn't have a way that I can go back on particular puzzles. So if you failed at a puzzle, you'd have to start from the beginning, which frustrated some people that played the game, especially since the puzzles were not randomly generated, so they would have to solve the exact same ones to get to the point that they were. What I learned from this one is you should pick an art style and stick with it. Also make more general components for your game objects so they can be reused over and over again. That would have saved me a ton of time, and maybe I could have gone back and fixed the art. Then I participated in the Game Devs Remake Mario Party collab, in which I made the classic Mario Party game Bumper Balls. I made my own 3D models based on my 2D characters from Stolen Hearts. I added my own features like the last player to win would get a crown on their head for the next game, a character select screen, and probably more features than were necessary for this collab. What I liked was I accomplished what I set out to do and delivered a similar experience to the original game. I had other people play the game and they were having a good time with it. Also, this was my first 3D game, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out that Unity 3D it is not so different from Unity 2D and is not nearly as intimidating once I got started with it. What I didn't like, gotta work on my visual appeal. The models could have been a lot better. The lighting in the game could have been better. Still missing that X factor that I can't quite place. Given that this was my first 3D game, there was a ton for me to learn. Besides some solid Blender modeling and animation practice, I learned to import Blender models into Unity, how to navigate 3D space in Unity, how to use multiple cameras, lighting, and all sorts of 3D tools needed for Unity 3D that aren't needed or are just a bit different in 2D. Most recently, I created Squid Game, Red Light, Green Light, with real squids. This is probably the crown jewel of the games that I finished this year. I did all the modeling and animations and the gameplay, and all of those I think turned out great. That's what I liked. I think this game has a lot more visual appeal. It has that X factor, although I got a ton of help given that I was using a reference TV scene to build my game around. That particularly helped me with getting the colors right and the lighting right, because I was just trying to mimic what I saw on the show. And I was quite happy with how the gameplay turned out as well. I showed the game to my friends and family who had a great time trying to cross the finish line. I really like that the last game that I made this year, in my opinion, was the best. That makes me feel like I had a real progression with my work. I liked Squid Game the show, and I liked making the game, but I definitely made this game because I was hoping to ride the trend and get my views up. I'm happy with how it all turned out, but I always feel better when I've created something that's truly mine, which Squid Game is not. And in fact, here's a hot take. Squid Game is not even original itself. It's based on a game. Can you guess? Fall Guys. That's right, I said it. Squid Game is just a ripoff of Fall Guys. Anyway, moving on. Things that I've learned. I've learned more from this project than probably any of the other projects that I've mentioned so far. About a month of time was only spent in Blender, working and reworking the models and animations, which came out great compared to the ones that I made for Bumper Balls. Given if I didn't practice the modeling and the animations for Bumper Balls, then this one would have looked much worse, and my previous work helps me to make better work in the future. I also learned about fluid simulators and integrating that with Unity. I leveraged the built-in Cinemachine components for local multiplayer and camera movement, and I built my first AI system for the AI squids to use, albeit the logic wasn't all that complex. So here are some of the 2021 stats. I did 4 game jams. I conducted 6 interviews with other game devs. I worked on a total of 10 games. I uploaded 22 videos. I got an awesome increase of 135 new subscribers, so thanks so much of you who subscribed this year. I finished 0 Stolen Hearts. I made 1 game for the sake of making a musical. I've killed hundreds of squids, and I've embarrassed myself countless times in a desperate attempt to entertain you. Reviewing the year, I do feel like I accomplished a lot, and I'm super happy about that. When I look back at some of the stuff that I worked on early on in 2021, I just can't believe that it's only been a year since then. But there are a few boxes that I didn't get to check. First, I didn't have any real releases. All the games that I've completed for this year have been for game jams, collabs, or for the sake of making YouTube content. And I have no problem with that, but ultimately, my goal is to make this more than a hobby. That means I need to release full games that I can actually make some money on. Second, following that, and most importantly, I did not finish Stolen Hearts. It was a goal I had to finish this game in 2021, but obviously I did not get there. I've been working on it throughout the year, but between a personally busy summer and getting completely sidetracked by all these other projects, I've only worked on it for about 5 of the 12 months in the year. If you ever watched the video that I made about staying motivated, then you know that I consider these types of goals outcome goals. Goals based on results. And outcome goals are nice, but they're not as important to me as process goals. Process goals are goals based on focusing on the journey and allowing that to take you from A to B. Rather than saying, I want to accomplish A, B, and C, a process goal is just about focusing on the work that you're putting in every day. And I have accomplished most of my process goals for 2021, which I'm pretty happy about. There was rarely a day that went by that I didn't do any game dev at all, which I'm pretty happy about. Maybe I'll make a goals video for 2022, but right now, my job is to work on, finish, and release Stolen Hearts, and not get distracted by other projects. So that's what I'm focused on. How did your 2021 go? What are your goals for 2022? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what I did in 2021, be sure to like the video. And also, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, I got a lot more game dev content coming out in 2022. Also, feel free to jump in the Discord. Got one of those, like everyone else. Have a happy new year, and I'll see you in 2022.
You never smooched Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
You said that one already.
You never sang "Bring Him Home" at the Lincoln Memorial.
I actually did that one.
I love Les Mis.
10th anniversary Dreamcast?
To die for.
I know, right?